I remember being told that I was just like my mother. I was a hooker and a whore, that I was a piece of shit and I was worthless, even before I knew what these words meant.
At 9, I was sexually assaulted by the babysitter.
My mother was introduced into the lifestyle of prostitution. She was trafficked at around age 11. Then she got pregnant with me age 16.
At 7, my father came home from prison and he got killed on Mother's Day.
I was allowed to drink, I was allowed to smoke weed at age 11.
But Uncle Bob would always make me sit on his lap. It's what prepped me into sexual feelings that wasn't supposed to be there way before my time.
At age 12, I started doing harder drugs. I would try anything and everything that you had in order to escape my reality.
I grew up fast and I learned a lot of things I shouldn't have learned at 9 years old.
Within 2 weeks of being here, I am smoking crack cocaine with my mother and prostituting on the streets of Columbus.
You do these sex acts and they give you McDonald's and you haven't a clue how much you just made them.
And that's where childhood definitely stopped for me.
And then when he, puts the fear of God in you, like you just want to close your eyes and hurry up and get through it.
I would get picked up pretty quick because I would carry my backpack and you could tell I was very young and people would be like, are you just getting out of school?
I was broken down. I was like 100 pounds. I had a broken collarbone. I had a black eye. I had no shoes on my feet.
I remember catching my first soliciting charge at age 16. Do you know what the officer said to me? That I was a 16-year-old crack whore and he let the John go and took me to jail.
Just horrific things happened to me. Somebody got paid not to say something.
You would not believe the people that stop and pick you up, still in their like scrubs from work, like pulling up and like there's their badge and they're a doctor.
I was trafficked by dope dealers. I was trafficked by a girlfriend.
And I've had pastors, I've had reverends, I've had police officers, sheriff officers.
Domestic violence and the abusive boyfriends and the rapes and the trauma led me right into that space.
And if you would have asked me if I was being trafficked, I would have said no, I had no idea what that even meant.
I was trying to run away from it, but I ran right to it.
It would disgust me, but it was kind of like too late and I was already in too deep.
God, please help me.
Welcome to the Ohio State Bar Foundation's On the Margin, Foster Youth at Risk for Human Trafficking Symposium. This evening, you will hear from topic experts who will provide a thoughtful conversation on the topic of foster youth who, all too frequently, get caught in the grip of human trafficking. You can look forward to an evening full of information, which we hope will lead to more awareness and, most importantly, action. 100% of the sponsorship donations will go to 3 honoree organizations who are working to break the cycle of youth who are being trafficked. CASA of Franklin County, Advocating Opportunity, and the Ohio Justice and Policy Center. If you are inclined to donate, please pull out your phone anytime during the program and text MARGIN, that's MARGIN, to 614-810-4555. This donation information will run on the bottom of your screen throughout the program tonight. Thank you to all of our sponsors, especially our legacy donors, the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, Clappity Family Charities, and the Ohio State Bar Association, who have made significant donations to continue the terrific work of the honorees. Special thanks to Clappity Family Charities for their matching gift, which has made possible very generous donations from a number of sponsors and continued giving through this program. This event has implemented all social distancing procedures and practices for the safety of our participants. Masks have only been removed during individual speaking portions.
Hello, and thank you for joining our symposium today. My name is Mark Kittrick, and I'm president of the Ohio State Bar Foundation. I'm proud to be a part of this organization every day, but not only proud, but inspired to be part of such a learning and incredible experience as this symposium is going to be for you. The Foundation's 2019 Fellows class of attorneys focused their philanthropic energy to these foster youth who live on the margin and are at risk for human trafficking. The class planned, organized, and executed this symposium to raise critical awareness, a lot of awareness that people don't even know about, a problem, frankly, that has gone on too long for decades, and we must stop it. Thanks to the help of this symposium, that is our goal. Donations and sponsorship dollars have been raised for three very important organizations who work diligently and tirelessly for our youth who are in the grip of human traffickers. To date, a significant amount of money has been donated to this symposium to be distributed to three incredibly worthy organizations.
My name is Emily Dunlap, and I'm a staff attorney with Advocating Opportunity. I wanted to take a moment to thank you for joining us for this phenomenal event tonight. I wanted to thank the survivors who joined us to share their experiences, the Ohio State Bar Foundation and this class of fellows for putting on such an incredible event, and for Attorney General Yost for always standing in steadfast support of survivors of human trafficking. We could not be more grateful to be here with our fellow honorees receiving proceeds that will help continue to provide legal services and advocacy for survivors of human trafficking across Ohio. We are honored and humbled to be recognized tonight and could not be more thrilled to be here with all of you. I hope you enjoy the program.
On behalf of my fellow 250 CASA volunteers, I would like to thank the Ohio State Bar Foundation for honoring us with this recognition and special donation. For almost 30 years, CASA of Franklin County volunteers and staff have worked to provide a consistent presence in the lives of abused and neglected children in this community. Our trained guardians ad litems are the eyes of the court and the voice of the child. CASA's slogan is "Change a Child's Story," and every day in foster homes, classrooms, schoolyards, and doctor's offices, our volunteers are working with other professionals to better the lives of the children entrusted to our care. On behalf of the hundreds of kids that CASA volunteers will serve this year, I thank you.
Linda and her husband, Joe, feel so strongly about the work of the organizations and the importance of meeting this special need. They have elected to make a very generous gift of up to $50,000. Let me repeat this, up to $50,000, matching every other donation made to this symposium. Think about that. Take that inside you. Think where you need to help and support what they're doing and match that. We thank them for this amazing gift, their years of service to the children in our community. And we urge all participants here, as you listen and think about what's going on in our society, to take advantage of this potential gift by pledging generously today. You can do so right now. Stop listening to me, go to osbf.org/symposium, and please consider a donation now. It's so important. You're going to help a child. You're going to have them get better integrated. You're going to protect them and help our society in general.
Hello, my name is Sasha Naiman from the Ohio Justice and Policy Center. Thank you to everybody who is attending this program. I want to thank the Ohio State Bar Foundation and the Fellows class. And I want to thank all of the donors. Your time, your donations are allowing organizations like OJPC to provide services to survivors of human trafficking statewide. I also want to thank the staff of OJPC and of the other honorees who are doing this important work. I want to thank Attorney General Yost, who has always stood behind survivors of trafficking. And of course, I want to thank the survivors, whose resilience and whose power are such a light for all of us. Thank you. I hope you enjoy this program.
Let me now introduce to you our esteemed Ohio Attorney General, Dave Yost. Dave is an ally in the battle and fight against human trafficking. After 2 terms as auditor of the state of Ohio, Dave was elected Ohio Attorney General in 2018 and took office January 14, 2019. As Attorney General, Dave has prioritized the opioid crisis and human trafficking. He has launched scientific initiatives to curb the number of Ohioans succumbing to substance abuse disorders. But he's also increased dramatically human trafficking enforcement while pushing for legislation that will allow more effective prosecutions in buyers, sellers, and human trafficking enforcement. Now, we welcome the Attorney General, Dave Yost.
Thank you for all joining the program today, and thank you to the Ohio State Bar Foundation for sponsoring it. Human trafficking is an abomination, and my goal as Attorney General is to make Ohio pure hell for traffickers. As you may know, shortly after I became Attorney General, I launched the Human Trafficking Initiative in my office and hired a special staff to help educate Ohioans about human trafficking and to help link all the people and organizations involved in combating this modern-day slavery. We're also pursuing legislation to increase the penalties imposed on those who buy and sell sex. Last January, we held the first human trafficking summit in Ohio and drew an overflowing crowd of more than 700 people. We had to wait list folks because the hall wasn't big enough. Our second summit will be on January 14th, and I hope you'll attend. It will, like everything else right now, be a virtual event, and I encourage you to register at www.ohioattorneygeneral.gov/human trafficking. I'm pleased that this conference is focusing on the correlation between foster care and human trafficking. As you know, an appalling percentage of human trafficking victims have spent time in the foster care system. Studies have put the percentage of human trafficking victims that were in the foster care system between 60 and 80%, depending on the methodology, which is not to say that foster care system is causal, that's a result. I think, frankly, what it is more reflective of is the fact that children who are in the foster care system are already vulnerable, and predators are very good at picking victims, people that they can intimidate, people who they can silence, people who they can take advantage of. Like most social issues, foster care and human trafficking incredibly complex. And to give you an example, I'd like to tell you the story of the case today of Sherry Baisden. When she was very young, she was sexually abused by a family member for 4 years. When the state when she finally reported the abuse at age 13, she ended up, like so many others, in the foster care system. She bounced from one foster care family to another, 16 foster care families. Some were hostile, some were abusive, some were good. But Sherry acknowledges that even when a family treated her well, the emotional and psychological wounds that she carried with her made it impossible to believe that they genuinely cared for her. To her mind, she represented to her volunteer parents nothing more than a paycheck. She thought the only value that she had was in how much money she could bring in. Like so many foster children, she acted out, she ran away. She created massive headaches even for the people who sincerely cared for her. The rest of her story is tragically familiar. Drug addiction, and eventually enslavement to a pimp who kept her dependent on drugs. Dozens of felonies and misdemeanors followed, as well as failed recovery attempts. Finally, she ended up in the Franklin County catch court, where human trafficking victims receive counseling, practice sobriety, and learn life skills necessary to a normal existence. It's a 2-year program. Then she graduated to Freedom a la carte, a food catering service that was founded to help survivors of human trafficking and addiction learn job and social skills. Today, Sherry is a substance abuse counselor Her feelings today about her experience in foster care, as you might think, are complicated. She thinks a lot of improvements are needed, particularly in the screening of would-be foster parents. But she also knows that even the best, most caring foster parents might be taking on children whose problems can't simply be loved away. As Sherry puts it, a lot of times you can't fix something that's already broken. But we have to keep trying. That's what today's event is all about. God bless you all for it. I'd like to thank the honorees that we're recognizing today. Emily Dunlap of Advocating Opportunity, Sasha Naiman of the Ohio Justice and Policy Center. I want to particularly call out Sasha because during a debate on House or Senate Bill 5, which is a radical, innovative way for human trafficking victims to get a fresh start by getting an expungement of their criminal record after they have gotten free from their enslavement. She was there to help work with our office in the drafting of the language. And even though during my legal career I have been on opposite sides of litigation involving her organization, we came across those historic differences of opinion and policy on this important issue. And Sasha, I appreciate your leadership. Finally, I want to mention Linda Clapperty of the Court-Appointed Special Advocates of Franklin County. I should note that Linda is a volunteer. It's telling that an organization asks a volunteer to come in and support them at a symposium like this. Not the people that get paid, not the staff director or the the contract attorneys who see the work in the courts, but they're volunteer. Linda, that speaks very highly of the high regard your colleagues in that organization hold you in. Linda retired from teaching 27 years ago. I know you won't believe it when you look at her, but she wanted to continue working with kids. When she learned the court-appointed Special Advocates Program, called CASA for short, in Franklin County, that they needed volunteers, she signed up. 18 years later, she's helped hundreds of kids. Well done, Linda. Now I'd like to introduce the moderator of today's symposium, a person that I have immense respect for, although we too have been on the opposite sides of policy disagreements. I think that it's wonderful to see people from such a broad spectrum that have all come together to recognize that human trafficking is something that we can all agree on. It's something we can fight together. Yvette McGee-Brown is currently a partner with Jones Day and has had a distinguished career. Former justice on the Ohio Supreme Court and on the Franklin County Common Pleas Court. Advocacy for children and families is a theme that runs through Justice McGee-Brown's career. After joining the Supreme Court, she became chair of an interagency task force focused on improving the educational outcomes for children in foster care. She's founding president of the Center for Child and Family Advocates at Nationwide Children's Hospital and has redefined how hospitals, law enforcement, and social welfare groups respond to children and families caught in the cycle of abuse. I frankly couldn't leave you in better hands. Would you please welcome former Justice Yvette McGee-Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Yost, and welcome to our program On the Margin. It's my pleasure to be your moderator for this evening. So I assure you, this is going to be an entertaining hour of your time. Let's start with Bomika Bhumika has been working at Public Children's Services Association of Ohio, that's a mouthful,
It is.
as anti-human trafficking coordinator since March 2018. In this grant-funded role, she provides training and technical assistance to those working with trafficked children involved in child welfare and juvenile justice. Welcome, Bhumika.
Thank you.
And then Jason. He's our law enforcement guy. He's supervisory special agent for Homeland Security investigations in Columbus. In this capacity, he leads a team of approximately 20 personnel dedicated to investigating national security threats, human trafficking, child exploitation, financial crimes, narcotics trafficking, and other violations of federal law in the Central Ohio area. That's a lot. My goodness, Jason, thank you for your service. We are so lucky to have you with us. Thank you for your time today. And then Judge, one of my friends, Judge Linda Tusi Teodosio. Say that fast 3 times. Judge Teodosio works on the juvenile court bench and has been extensively recognized. In September 2016, she received the Thomas Moyer Award for Judicial Excellence from the Ohio State Bar Association. She's been honored by both the Ohio Juvenile Court Judges and Magistrates Associations with their Judicial and Distinguished Services Awards, respectively. In 2012, Judge Teodosio received the prestigious award for innovation from the Margaret Clark Morgan Foundation. Congratulations. In 2010, she received, now this is a biggie, the MacArthur Foundation's Champion for Change Award for her work in the Models for Change Mental Health Juvenile Justice Action Network. Holly Daniels. Holly is an expert in the anti-trafficking field and has spoken on the topic in multiple conferences, trainings, and documentaries. She just finished telling me how full her plate is, and we appreciate you giving us some time here this evening. She is a survivor of human trafficking. Holly now dedicates her life to serving others who feel stuck in cycles of exploitation and educating professionals on how they can intervene. She founded and continues to direct the nonprofit organization Reaching for the Shining Stars with a Z, STARZ,
Right.
which provides basic necessities and invaluable support to women experiencing trafficking. Holly owns and operates 2 recovery housing programs in the Columbus area for men and women recovering from substance abuse disorders. She also serves on the Survivors Advisory Panel for a federal grant project on identifying and responding to juvenile victims of human trafficking. No wonder your plate is full.
I do a little more. I still do more. I still do more. That's not all of it.
Thank you for being with us, Holly. And then Stephanie Rollins. She is a 30-year survivor of human trafficking and has 7 years of sobriety. Congratulations. Stephanie is a graduate of the Catch program in 2015 and graduated from the Amethyst program in 2017. Stephanie is currently attending GED classes and finished the peer mentor training and is now an official peer support specialist, mentoring other survivors on their road to recovery. Stephanie was employed at Freedom a la carte training program, which employs survivors of human trafficking for 3 years, and has moved on to work at the Peer Center and now is the education specialist at Grace Haven. Stephanie is now proudly an alumni of the Catch Court, Amethyst, and Freedom a la carte, and is sitting on an advisory board of human trafficking. Stephanie has successfully lived in her own apartment for the last 3 years and is now living the life of self-sufficiency. I love that. Thanks to the work and skills she gained from Catch Court, Amethyst, and Freedom a la carte. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today. All right, so let's start with Bhumika from the Public Children's Services Association of Ohio. Why are foster youth so at risk for human trafficking?
Well, I think something to note is that anyone can experience human trafficking. Any individuals of any race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, U.S. citizens, foreign nationals. But children in foster care do experience additional vulnerabilities due to potentially unstable living situations, distance from friends and family, experiences of trauma, emotional vulnerabilities, lack of resources. Some of the risk factors that we might see with foster youth who are at risk of being trafficked might be history of maltreatment, especially sexual abuse, history of running away for longer periods of time, running away more frequently, homelessness. And when we think about how trafficking works, I think traffickers exploit individuals who have a lot of unmet needs, right? Those needs can be, for food, shelter, clothing, but a lot of the time it's those emotional needs for a sense of belonging, love, safety, and security. I think traffickers identify those individuals who don't maybe have the supports that everyone should, and try to target them to control them and bring them into those trafficking situations.
So this might be somewhere where either Stephanie or Holly can weigh in, but what are some of the techniques that traffickers use? Are they just like these slick talking handsome guys? How do they get young women and young men to trust them?
So it's not always men. I've met a few women in my time who were also there to pick up that emotional slack that was not being met by friends and family or internally, like that low self-esteem that we struggle with. Most of us struggle with, not just people that are susceptible to being trafficked.
Right.
But so it doesn't have a name, a face, or an identity. I've seen people that are successful be traffickers, and I've seen the thug on the street be a trafficker. It doesn't have an identity. But I do know that they all have one thing in common, and that is they prey on the people that are vulnerable. They find their weakness and they exploit it, whether that be drug addiction, lack of familial support, lack of money support, lack of emotional or self-esteem, and they will use that to their advantage to kind of get you to do whatever it is. It can come in the form of a boyfriend telling you that he loves you, and then the next thing you know, in order to support us, would do this one thing for me, please. Don't you love me? It could be a friend introducing you to the lifestyle, making it look glamorous. Right? And she benefits from this as well for whatever reason that could be, whether it be money and buying items, drug addiction, which is a lot of times I see that. It could be the drug dealer that supported your habit and now is putting you on the street like you're going to do this, or you owe me X amount of money and now you're in debt to him. It could be somebody, like I've heard of foster families trafficking children. I've heard of families trafficking children. In my situation, my mother trafficked me. So it doesn't have an identity, and there's no one certain person, but there's a common theme for all of them, and they're exploiting our weaknesses and our vulnerabilities.
And so, Bamika, for the children's foster care agencies of Ohio, public children's services agencies, what can you do to help to keep children safe who are at risk of being trafficked?
Yeah, I think everybody plays a role in keeping children safe, right? Everybody has a sense of responsibility in looking after the children in their community and developing safe, stable, healthy connections with them. I think that's one of the most important things we can do to prevent trafficking from occurring in the first place. In regards to children's services agencies, child welfare, I think it's absolutely critical that people be knowledgeable about the reality of human trafficking, not get caught up in what we might see in movies and TV shows, but really learn from the people around us who have experienced something like this. Learning about human trafficking and then thinking comprehensively about the needs of those who may have experienced something like this, and recognizing that there are going to be a lot of barriers and challenges for those adults and children, right? Those barriers could be many trafficked individuals have criminal records due to the dynamics of their trafficking situation. They may have physical, mental health needs, rebuilding that sense of safety and security, creating that sense of belonging,
of trust,
right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Building rapport, gaining trust is a challenging process, but so worthwhile in supporting people who are coming out of that sort of situation and keeping them out of that situation.
My name is Tracy Martinez, and I'm a partner at the law firm of Squire Patton Boggs. Many people turn to lawyers in times of need, during stressful, vulnerable episodes in their life, often when hope seems lost. We are particularly proud to be a part of this learning and awareness opportunity. Anti-human trafficking work is also personal for me. I have been a supporter of these efforts for a number of years, where I was first introduced to the problems facing this population through the amazing work of Freedom a la carte. Funds raised through this symposium will go towards mitigating the risks of the susceptible population and will be used by service organizations with a proven record of success. Squire Patton Boggs, me, and you. Together, we can all make a difference.
And Jason, law enforcement plays a critical role in that. And when we think of law enforcement, we think of you coming in with the guns, making the arrest, throwing people in jail. But tell us about your work with STOP. Why is law enforcement, and particularly Homeland Security, even involved in this area?
Sure. So I'll begin with kind of defining Homeland Security and why we're involved and why human trafficking is something very significant that we work. We focus on transnational crime, and as we know with the World Wide Web, a lot of crimes can go online. Child exploitation, human trafficking, most definitely. As Mimika stated, the victims are not always from a local town or a rural area. They can cross state lines, they can cross international lines. Unfortunately, we've seen individuals smuggled all over the world. And one thing I wanted to comment on was, why do people do it? Well, with a commodity, say you're selling drugs, as soon as you sell those drugs, that's it, that commodity is gone. You've made your money, but now you're looking for that next source of income. When you have a victim of human trafficking that can be sold over and over and over, you basically end up having a continuous source of income. So with Homeland Security, we focus on those transnational threats, that criminality. We have several programs, STOP being one of them, STOP being an acronym. It's the Strategic Targeting Outreach Program. It's basically a focused outreach program, a multifaceted program that brings awareness to our local partners, to industry, to non-governmental organizations, basically emphasizing that plan with the 3 R's. One, recognizing the indicators of human trafficking, reporting that incident when you know that there probably is a victim of human trafficking, and then the response portion, which HSI being one of the government's lead enforcement entities targeting and combating human trafficking.
So, and how much of your time is spent dealing with the internet versus just, shoe leather, going out and finding these traffickers?
So I was mentioning it earlier in a previous conversation, but unfortunately, those leads are quite extensive, human trafficking and child exploitation, both where we see individuals groomed, procured, etc., online. That does take up a bulk of the work that we do.
And it's really hard to convince people that this person who's come across as so charming and so friendly is really out to cause them harm.
And I think Bhumika really nailed it when she was talking about how someone becomes a victim online, and Holly mentioned it as well. When you have somebody preying on those vulnerabilities, somebody that is now, especially in these times, especially school-aged children that are spending more time online doing classwork and etc. When they do a deep dive, if you will, and they end up going to places maybe they shouldn't online, that's where these individuals, these traffickers, will spend the time online, because that's basically their job.
Yeah.
Their job is getting good at making somebody else feel like they can trust them. And then that's where it begins.
Yeah. And Judge, I've sat in your seat, some of the horrors that we've seen. I mean, Holly talked about her own mother. I mean, it would amaze me the things that parents would allow to be done to their children. Talk about what it's like sitting on the bench and dealing with survivors of human trafficking.
Well, the survivors of human trafficking really have a tough battle ahead of them to get to a point where they feel comfortable and feel they can trust again. Our focus has been not only on victims and helping them move on, but also identifying youth that come through our system that might be at high risk to become victims of human trafficking. If we can provide some of those interventions prior to that experience, perhaps we can prevent those youth from becoming victims of human trafficking. I think it's important to recognize that human trafficking victims are not just people from other countries that are forced to sell themselves against their will because they don't understand the customs here. In my county, we have seen victims in every zip code, which means every social economic part of our county has had youth that have been victims of trafficking. We have seen parents traffic. We've seen step-parents, paramours traffic, and I think it's important to recognize that traffickers aren't limited to those people that go out and recruit these young women by grooming them or otherwise, but also the purchasers. And I think it's important to recognize that those purchasers have to be held accountable as well, because without the market, those individuals that would exploit these youth would not have a customer to sell to. So I think they need to be held accountable as well.
I can remember being on the bench and always facing this tough issue where I'd have this young woman brought in who I know that she was being trafficked, but putting her in jail didn't feel right. But on the other hand, I felt like if I didn't hold her, she was going to run back to the person who was trafficking her. And you always struggled with how do I, because she wasn't hearing me. She wasn't hearing me that she shouldn't be around this person. And her safety versus what felt punitive was always the push and pull when you're sitting there with the robe on. And then we had Grace Haven come about, right?
Yes.
So Grace Haven chooses to try to be the answer to that. And I remember talking with them when they wanted to start this program. Is Grace Haven having success keeping young women away from their traffickers?
Well, I think the biggest part was being able to, get certified in the My Life, My Choice curriculum, to be able to go to the level of a teenager's mind. It's like, okay, that's my boo, he would never do, it's so hard to be able to like, what does a trafficker look like in a child's mind? And
because they're not scary looking, they're very cute. Yeah?
It's not a boogeyman, it is your boy next door, it's your girl next door. And they get really close. I was trafficked at 12, so I am able to be able to connect with the girls on a level of, how very vulnerable I was, I was naive. And
you were 12.
Well, my father was killed when I was 7, so an older boy, he's noticing me. When you're having a toxic family home, it's like, okay, you're running away, he's noticing me, he's giving me the validation that I need. He is for me and nobody can tell me anything different. But the part of the manipulation piece is that they tell you everything you want to hear. So that turns you against all the people that love you. And so it isolates you over right there where they need you. And no, I'm not telling on him because, he feeds me, he protects me, he, gives me a place to sleep. He does all this stuff. And we're a team and I'm loyal, know. But it's really, really important that with a lot of the girls that we're working with, they're creatures of habit. They're so used to the trauma happening that they just keep running back into it because they don't know anything different. But
well, you see victims when they're so used to the drama, right? That as soon as you try to remove them from that and there's quiet, it feels like this isn't normal because your brain can actually be rewired from trauma, right?
So is the trauma bond really start a lot earlier than the actual abuse with the boyfriend as an adult? Does it?
That's a
I
good,
really
yeah,
do believe
that's
it
a good
is.
question. And so, Judge, and maybe Jason, where do you come down when you have that choice about the Solomon choice? Do I hold on to her physical body, or do I put her into a program like Grace Haven, understanding that more likely than not, she's running back to her trafficker?
I am a firm believer that we have to assist people in becoming empowered, and they need to be able to do that in their community. By holding an individual in detention, I don't give them the ability to empower themselves and to move forward. Grace Haven is wonderful. I've had youth that have participated in the program there. We have one in Summit County called Rahab Ministries that provides similar services. And I think they work very hard to gain trust, to make young people feel safe, to recognize that they're going to make mistakes, but that's okay. We're going to keep pushing forward. I think to expect that there's a magic wand that is suddenly going to break these habits that have taken years and years to develop is kidding ourselves. We need to take these young people, boys and girls, where they are and help them deal with the trauma that they've experienced, help them realize that the worth that they have and that they are valuable and they are treasured and that they can make a life for themselves doing whatever they feel that they're able to do. And I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, I think it's really important that it's like planting seeds, you know, and you've got all these people that really, really do genuinely care without a price tag at the end of it.
Yeah.
And then, you know, to show them, you don't know something that's good until you actually have it, right? So once you plan it and they know how that feels, then that's when change starts.
Oh, that's very good. You've got to know how it feels before the change to start. Jason?
And if I may, so just like the judge said, HSI takes a victim-centric approach to human trafficking. A lot of the things we do, we could not do without our local partners, without our non-governmental organizations that help us. HSI is fortunate that we have a full-time cadre of victim assistance specialists, victim advocate coordinators, forensic interview specialists. It is their main job and their priority to focus on the victim. Number one, to make sure that these victims are not re-victimized, but also it helps us because we need their voice. It empowers them so we can prosecute these traffickers that would resort to trafficking. So again, having those resources available and working with our external partners, making sure that the victim feels safe, that they can entrust in us, helping us, and I like to say, helping us putting those bad guys in orange jumpsuits.
Yeah, and you know, I think it's important for the audience to know that it takes time, right? That this is not something where you just flip a switch. To your point, you have to teach people what it feels like to feel good again before they can appreciate what they're walking away from.
Well, if you've never had it, you know, if you've come from a lifelong of toxicness, then of course we're going to be creatures of habit. We're going to, that's normal. Healthy come towards me and I ran. I was like, oh no, that's the bad thing. So I had to learn what healthy was in order to be able to embrace it. And it was like, oh wow, that feels really different. So, okay, that feels a little good. So maybe I need to trust this a little bit more. Maybe they might have something really, they, you know, what they're really trying to do. The transformation for me was amazing. It took every bit of every organization that played different parts in rebuilding me into the woman that I am today, of confidence, of dignity and worth. And I think that that is the key. It takes the whole army to be able to build one child. And that's what, and that's what where I'm at. It's no child left behind.
And so, go ahead, Judge.
If I could just follow up on that, I think there's a lot of misconceptions that when someone discovers a victim of human trafficking, that they're going to say, I'm here to rescue you, and that they're going to be so thrilled to see help on
Yes,
the
that's right.
To the contrary, they don't see themselves as victims, and they see their significant other as, or the trafficker as a significant other, a boyfriend, or something of that sort. So I think it's important to remember that they're not waiting for us. It's going to take time to build up that trust, and they're not going to see us as a hero coming in on a white horse.
That's a very important point.
We're
Just
quite-
like you said,
quite
where
mad.
you didn't want to give punitive consequences for her actions. It took me 21 years in and out of the judicial system. And like, I mean, the deputies at our local county jail knew me by my first name and like didn't even make me sit in the holding cell, would just take me straight back to the dorm. And you know, I got special privileges because they knew me so well. It was ridiculous. This was my life. And each judge probably, you know, I owe a thank you to for, you know, making the decision to send me to jail or prison a few times because they intervened for me when I didn't want them to. And it took 21 years, 17 years being held by my trafficker or traffickers to realize that I was a victim in this situation, and it gave me the option to do one of two things: either allow it to continue and remain the victim and in this miserable state of life I was living, or it gave me the opportunity for self-determination to choose to do something else and empower myself. But I had to sit down and somebody had to educate me on what was happening. Like, if you would have come to me at any given point in those 21 years and said, "You're being trafficked," I would have told you no. I would have said it was my decision, that I was doing this because I wanted to. I felt like a bad person. Like, this was me doing this. And then once somebody gave me, you know, the bits and pieces of education that I needed to realize, like, whoa, this wasn't my choice. I was groomed for this. I was led into this lifestyle. I had the opportunity to empower myself and walk away.
So what was the aha moment? Was it a compilation of 21 years, each incident and each effort building on the other? Or was there this, at the end of the 21 years, this aha moment?
So it was not just an aha. Well, there was like a point where the light was switched on for me and I could see clearly. I was at ORW, which is a prison here for women in Ohio, and it was not my first time there, but this time there was a mental health staff that said, "I think you'd benefit from this human trafficking group that I run." And I looked at her and I said, "I'm not a trafficking victim, but I'll attend your group so I can get out of the cottage and it'll look good if I want to apply for judicial." And I went to this group, and I tell you, like, all the women in their stories were just like mine. And we were going through this power, control, manipulation. Well, I can remember it very vividly. And it's the same one that they use for domestic violence survivors or victims. And like, I'm reading through this, and I'm reading through this packet of how, you know, this is being done to me. And I was like, whoa, this has been happening my entire life. Like, you know, at 11, you know, this has started, and at 15, this is when it really broke out. And here I am, 32 years old, and it's been happening my entire life. And I just gradually started to, like, continue to learn, but like, I gradually started to make decisions to do something different. And a lot of times I wanted to pull back and just go back to the comforts of what I've always known and always done. But like, there were things that were crumbling around me. And like, I don't know if y'all believe in a higher power, but everything happens for a reason. And Stephanie came to prison and did a lead for what we call Alcoholics Anonymous, a 12-step fellowship that I'm involved in. And it was just by chance that I was even at that meeting that evening, and she told her story, and it was just like mine. And she was in this program, and I'd heard about this program. It was those small seeds that had been planted prior to me actually realizing what had been going on. And like, I was like, hey, you know, I'm teeter-tottering on going to this program, and you just really sealed the deal for me, and I think I'm gonna go. And I ended up going. And like, it was that rewiring of everything that I had ever known in order to get me to this place where I'm at today. And like, man, like, I would have never in a million years dreamed that I'd be living the life that I'm living. Some days I forget where I come from, and I have to be humbled because it's a pretty good life, I promise. You know, so like, it's just like, wow, like, if it weren't for those people that intervened for me and could see things that I couldn't see, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. But my goal would be to like have had it happen sooner, because there was like lots of things that I can look back at now that I wish, like, you know, the judge here was there for me, or, you know, Mr. Homeland Security back there would have been there for me, because it wasn't like that 20 years ago. So I'm grateful that we're, you know, making strides, especially here in Ohio, man, we're kicking ass. And in what we do with the anti-trafficking movement. And I just wish that we can continue to grow and learn, especially from the voices of us, because we know what it's like. I mean, you can learn a lot in a book, but I can tell you, you'll never experience what I've experienced.
That's right.
I had a legal consequence from the very first time I ever used. I got caught for public intoxication downtown of Hillsborough is where I grew up. And my grandmother had to come pick me up from the sheriff's station, had to go to court, like there was this whole court process. And I was in and out of the judicial system from that moment on.
In and out of JDC, I'm in and out of Rosemont, I get awarded to foster care.
Foster care, group homes, boot camps, like the judges knew me by name.
And I'm a runner.
Nobody ever sat down and explained to me why I was being placed in foster care. It was more like, you did this, you are bad, you're being removed from everything you've ever known, and this is where you're going.
It was never long enough to actually say if I was ever placed in a good or bad place, because I would take off.
Nobody said, hey, here's some things that are happening and we want to intervene and try to do something different.
What I did see wasn't no better than the life I lived.
I had no clue. I was lost. Like, this was all new to me.
And so you get placed in these homes that you got 10, 12 kids already, and they look at you and say, just don't get in trouble.
So it was not a good experience. I felt like it was a punishment rather than an intervention.
God, please help me.
Hello, I'm Rita Sorenen, President and CEO of the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, and I'm so glad to be with you this evening as one of the sponsors of the Ohio State Bar Foundation's On the Margin, Foster Youth at Risk for Human Trafficking Symposium. The Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption is a proud supporter of this event. Our goals are similarly aligned, increasing the number of adoptions from foster care, and by doing so, averting threats of human trafficking. Youth in foster care face many uncertainties, moving from house to house, not feeling at home, fighting through the trauma that placed them in care in the first place, and not having a family. Because of these vulnerabilities, human traffickers see them as easy targets for grooming. As Ohioans, we should be alarmed. Our state has one of the highest rates in the nation for human trafficking cases, so we must work diligently to protect our foster youth. It's time to break this vicious cycle and stand up for those who don't have a voice. Education about the exploitation of foster children is critically needed. Thank you for your passion and your commitment to protecting our most vulnerable youth.
Mika, so what are the children's services agencies around the state doing? So, because you're working with families before children go into foster care, the agencies are working with children in foster care. What Holly just said is profound. I mean, are we training foster parents? Are we training caseworkers to be able to look at TikTok, to look at the social media these kids are on, so educating them about the risk of human trafficking?
Yeah. So children's services caseworkers in Ohio are required by law to have introductory training on human trafficking. So at that basic level, everyone within the first 2 years of joining that profession, they're getting some training on this issue, but I always think there's benefit to more training.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. Always, there's things that I'm learning every day, and I spend my work, I just talk about the issue of human trafficking every day. I can't imagine the challenges that caseworkers feel who are, already overburdened, overworked, facing,
and underpaid.
Underpaid, yes. Absolutely. Who are, working with families who have such significant trauma and are experiencing such significant challenges, right? And I really think it requires communities to come together. Yes. It can't just be on one organization or one entity. It can't just be on law enforcement. It can't just be on children's services, right? Everyone has to come together. Everyone has to be educated.
We should literally be having part of this on the news. I mean, because I'm astonished by what you just said about
a lot of people
TikTok.
Don't realize it.
Right. I mean, we ought to be telling parents.
Until I got on there and started scrolling through this stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, these are are people like enticing these young children to like come get spoiled or join OnlyFans or do this or do that. And essentially it's trafficking.
That is
it's prostitution. And somebody's benefiting from it. So like they're coercing them into this lifestyle. And especially if you're at home and you're being neglected and all you're doing is scrolling on TikTok
Or
because you
even
have
if you're
no
not being
interaction.
neglected, your parents are letting you just sit there, stare at a
Or
screen.
you're living in poverty. Like this is going to be extremely enticing.
What I've noticed is that the new norm of today is the phone or the tablets or the internet is the new babysitter.
Yeah, it never leaves you.
It's like the kids are so enticed and they're like, you don't even hear them for an hour or two. But what I have noticed is that it's so important to be the educator, to be out there, to educate the red flags, to educate what it is they're looking at, to educate the parents, to educate the healthcare workers, the law enforcement, to be able to be the voice of what it is that we actually went through step by step, to be able to plant the seeds of what this new technology is really out here doing and how these pedophiles and human traffickers can come up through not only TikTok, but it's Minecraft. There's robots.
Everything.
They're hacking people's accounts. They're going in. They're portraying that the boys, they are very competitive. They don't think about looking at the profile to see if that's really who it is. And so that's where the DEA, comes in and they're like, okay, they're portraying to be certain ones to be able to catch the bad guys, And so it's very complex. It's very, very scary.
It's so multi-layered,
and it's very, very real.
Yeah. I mean, Jason, how can law enforcement keep up? I mean, I'm standing here terrified now. I mean, like, it is.
No, so it's a great question, and unfortunately, the technology is outpacing the rest of us who are trying to get a grasp of the current apps that are being used, and we see regular apps that are used most frequently when individuals are trying to find victims, groom victims, etc. But Holly, we can both said it best that awareness, education is paramount, and it's not just to the public or not just to the parent or caregiver. Holly was mentioning law enforcement earlier. Law enforcement. Sometimes it was a very defined line. Did this happen? Well, this has to happen. That education to law enforcement, looking for those indicators. Sometimes you might have to press the issue a little bit. And it goes not only with victims, but even like your own children, right?
Yes.
Sometimes we just don't want to have those conversations, especially with younger children. But if that conversation is difficult, then it's probably worth having.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yes. I go into the schools. We have a K through 5, which is a good touch, bad touch. I think it goes all the way to that part of the kids. It's already shown that it's a fact that 99% is the ones that touched are the ones that they trusted the most, that was closest to them.
That's right.
That's the saddest part about it. So they got to know that it wasn't their fault from the beginning to be able to get them the right type of help, to get them where they need to be. But, a lot of the families, they shove it underneath the rug. It's a shame, guilt piece, and it falls onto the kids. And the next thing they're running around and they're going deeper and deeper into the woods. That makes them more high risk. And I think it's so important that I do go into and ambassadors and trainers of the trainers of lived experience of other survivors to be able to go out there and spread the word of the red flags and the vulnerabilities into the schools. Just to be able to have that awareness.
Absolutely. So Judge, I asked Holly what her aha moment was. Let me ask you that. When you decided to create a specialty court, the Restore Court, what was your tipping point? What made you start that?
Well, it really started when the state of Ohio passed its safe harbor law that allowed for diversion of charges of solicitation, prostitution, and other charges related to victimization of the youth, that made me take a closer look at this. And in doing some research and looking at some of the red flags, I thought to myself, well, I've unknowingly seen victims of human trafficking come through my court. I didn't recognize it for what it was at the time, but it was very clear to me that we see youth that are victims. And I thought to myself, these protections, these special services shouldn't be limited to youth that are victims. They should certainly be available for those, but we also need to take a look at those youth that are at particularly high risk to become victims themselves. So we worked very closely with a collaborative in our community to put everything into place that we needed to, educating our entire court staff on the red flags, so that if they recognize one of these red flags, they made a referral to a social worker who was specially trained to speak to these youngsters on what their experiences are and identify whether or not they are high risk to be a victim, to provide them with trauma-focused treatment, with mentors, with safe places to go where they could interact in safe spaces with individuals that care about them, to let them know that they have the support of the court and to provide them with encouragement. So it was a long process to put it in place, but we have a very strong community, and I think that we have done a lot of good work in helping support these victims to help them get back on the right path. What I might share as well is many of those individuals that we identified as high risk, as they became more familiar with us, as they began to trust us, their mentors, their guardian ad litems, other people that were working with them in a supportive way, they felt free to finally disclose that yes, indeed, they were victims, even though they didn't feel comfortable disclosing that in the beginning. So I think to take that type of approach to it has been really a positive thing for youth in our community.
And do you hold any kind of detention sentence over them, or is it just completely voluntary? It's like when we did family drug court, you still dangled that if you don't do this, because you had to keep people incentivized to keep coming back if they didn't comply.
Well, you know, I would like to say that we're successful our first time around every time, but we all know that life just doesn't work that way. And, you know, I have to say that there have been instances where I have had to hold a youth in detention. There have been instances where some of the youth have committed so many acts that they posed a risk to community safety. And so unfortunately, I've had to send youth to the Department of Youth Services. But it's always been with an eye of building a reentry plan for those youth. What can we do so that when they do return to the community, we make sure all those safeguards are there? What can we do to make sure they receive the education and support that they need while they are incarcerated in some way, so that when they come out, we can better support them? Those are sad days for me when I find myself in a situation where I feel that that's my last alternative. But again, fortunately, there are places like Grace Haven, Rahab Ministries, Safe House, Rebecca's Place, that do give us some alternatives that can provide other options for these youth.
Yeah, and I think it's important for the audience to know. I mean, you know, Holly talked about being in the treatment program at the Ohio Reformatory for Women, where that was the switch came on, and she listened and was able to start her rehabilitation, I guess, from that point, or habilitation, whichever way you want to call it. And then the judge having that program where she's looking out for kids, and then even if you have to deliver consequences, preparing a plan for them to re-enter. Because I think so many people see law enforcement in the courts and incarceration as that's just the end, and we're done with people, and it can actually be the beginning.
Yeah, I bet you guys bet you guys get a lot of burnout too from you know, but just don't ever give up hope, because here I am. I am that child that you probably had to sentence 20 times or like completely kick out of the program or feel like they were hopeless, and I'm here today and I'm pretty damn successful. But it might not be the first time, it might not be the third time, it might not even be the 50th time, because I know I had over 50, but it might be the last time. You never know when it will be, so never give up hope if you're working with youth or women or boys or men that are in this situation, because it might be that one time that you intervene and give them a chance that they might take it. You never know when that will be.
In addition to what everyone else has been saying, I want to give a little bit more context into the experiences and vulnerabilities foster youth face. Often they're coming from families where there's a lot of instability, not many good, healthy relationships, people to look up to, people who are safe, stable, supportive, or even consistent. Many of these youth face many significant struggles finishing school, unfortunately, and experience a lot of poor outcomes later in life. We want to ensure that these individuals are being supported in every aspect of their lives. And everybody can play a role in this. Everybody can be a a safe, supportive person in that child's life. If you're a teacher, being present, engaged, listening to them, talking to them about their concerns. If you're wanting to support individuals who are at high risk of experiencing this type of exploitation, consider becoming a mentor, volunteering as a court-appointed special advocate, volunteering with your local anti-trafficking coalition or another service provider. And I encourage you to think comprehensively about the needs of these youth, but as well as their strengths and resiliency. We want to support them in achieving their goals. We want to make sure that they have a good life moving forward.
You know, and following up on that about the risk of youth in foster care, there's a lot of good programs surrounding independent living that youth are able to receive as they age out of foster care. But when they reach that 18th birthday and they are emancipated, they're oftentimes at risk to be trafficked in what is commonly known as survival sex. Because they don't have the family support necessarily, they don't have the income to take care of themselves, they can become victims by someone who may take them in and provide for their basic needs in exchange for sex, which could lead to either further trafficking. Fortunately, the state of Ohio has a program called Bridges, which is put in place to really help these young people that are aging out of foster care and to continue to provide them with some kind of stability as they continue on the road to adulthood. And they're able to participate in that even after aging out of foster care through age 21. And it can provide them with financial assistance so that they have a place to stay, so that they have their basic needs met. And the youth's obligation is to be gainfully employed for a certain number of hours or to be engaged in a full-time educational program. So it really does provide the support so these youth don't feel like they have to go to someone else who might take advantage of them in order to have their basic and fundamental needs met. So, you know, kudos to Ohio for having such a program, and I think it really will support these youth and make them less vulnerable to the chances that they could be trafficked.
And less victims, less youth being trafficked, I think is what everybody wants. Can we stamp it out? I would certainly hope so. It's great to see everybody here adding their resources and expertise to hopefully shine awareness and give those victims a voice. In 2019, HSI alone identified over 400 victims of human trafficking. To me, the number was just too much. It was astonishing to know that there were at least that many, and we're talking our agency alone. So when we talk about the indicators, we just have to be aware: has that individual distanced themselves from family, from friends, from the community? Are they showing signs or symptoms of mental or physical abuse? Have they dropped out of school? Have they withdrawn, you know, from those that they know? So one of the cases that we have worked in the past, and this is what we see, we know that the technology changes and it's hard to stay on top of that. But those social apps, it's really important for parents and caregivers to be there, to not be afraid to check on those, because that is a segue, it's a gateway for these individuals to make a contact in there where it's seemingly innocent. You know, maybe that child or that juvenile does not know how to properly set their privacy settings, so anybody can send them a friend request or just send them a random message. But once they start having that banter back and forth on these social apps, that's when the individual, the groomer, the bad guy, will try to get them over to a different platform, a darknet, peer-to-peer, you know, something where they can start really getting in-depth about what they want them to do, where they want them to meet, etc. One case that we've seen in the past, we've had individuals that, you know, and again, and Bhumika stated it great at the beginning, is a trafficking victim can be anybody, any walk of life, ethnicity, you know, national origin, does not matter. Individuals that have come over to visit the United States, or they've come to the United States and they're expecting once they get here they can get a job or whatever. These individuals, in this particular case, ended up taking their passports, basically putting them under lock and key in a hotel room and forcing them to pay off their fees for everything that they were receiving by commencing in commercial sex acts. It wasn't until they had an opportunity to escape and approach law enforcement to tell them what was going on that anybody was able to do anything for that. So again, it's awareness. This was a hotel. And when we talk about giving our outreach to industry partners, hotels are one of them. You know, where do we see an uptick and where there might be higher incidence of human trafficking is when there are major sporting events or some sort of conference, you know, where more people are coming in town. Hotels are great. And we've had great success reaching out to those hotels saying, look, here are some things that it would be great if you would look for so you can report to us that may save somebody, that may prevent individuals from being trafficked. This was a major brand name hotel, not going to name it, but this was a major brand name hotel that had somebody in the hotel just asked a simple question. What's going on? This doesn't seem right. If it doesn't seem right, you should probably say something.
Funny, I failed to mention that Holly was pursuing her bachelor's degree in social work, and thank you. Because I think you're exactly the kind of person that we need in social work. You know, it's one thing to tell people, as you said earlier, what you've studied. It's something else to say, this is what I lived. And I know that you can turn this around, that I believe in you. Holly's also been recognized by British Broadcasting Corporation as one of 100 women of the world. So I'd say you have done a complete, not even 180, 360, 580, but
whatever we call it.
It's amazing.
Listen, some days I wake up and be like, who are you? Man, if you only knew. Like, let me tell you the whole story.
Well, we are so glad that you are you. And to your earlier point, you know, a lot of things happen to us in life, to you and Stephanie and to all of us, that we can't control. But I think the victory is in taking ownership of that and pushing forward. Because all of those things that happen to you are part of your story for moving forward. So I really do want to give you two the opportunity for the last word. And so I'll start with Stephanie and then come back to Holly. How's that?
I think the key ingredient to success with all of the human trafficking, being as a kid with domestic, verbal, physical, you know, the sexual, all of that is, if I could have had a Rahab, if I could have had a Grace Haven in my life, if I could have had a judicial system that was able to see the red flags, if I was able to see all the things that I was going through that could have taught me what I was getting ready to endure, what I was getting ready to, you know, would have gave me the structure, would have, you know, give me that mentor that, you know, when I got into the Catch Court program and I found that there was a place for me, that wasn't until I was an adult. So that's why I have really pounded the pavement and have a strong passion with the younger juveniles, because I know that if there could have been a me in my life, I could have changed, and a lot quicker than what it had been. So I might have missed that boat, but with Rahab's and Grace Haven and Switch, all these different programs for the teens and the youth, I think it's going to be the key ingredient to be able to show them that, guess what, if I can change, so can you.
Absolutely. Wow. Holly?
So I guess one of the things that I'd like to say to like service workers or, you know, community healthcare workers or judicial officials is never label the youth or the woman or the man that's coming in front of you as a criminal or a bad person. Don't give up hope. You could be that point of intervention. And again, it might not be that first time. It might not be that third time. It might not even be the 50th time. Continue to reach your hand out and give them an opportunity to change. Don't just give up hope. And then I agree with Stephanie and most of the people here today with education being the key to prevention, whether it be in different facilities that Stephanie had named, or with your own children or school. Like, even the youth need to be educated on what to look out for, because trafficking isn't abductions. It's not like the movie Taken. Like, nobody's pulling up in a big white van in Walmart with chloroform and drugging you and dragging you into the van. It's going to be somebody that you know, somebody that's close to you, and it's a slow and gradual process of a gain of your trust and an expansion of your boundaries. That's how it starts. So you're not looking for this creepy old man stalking outside the window of your child's bedroom. You're looking for somebody that's close, whether it be a family member, a friend, a boyfriend, somebody in the community that you might not even know. You need to educate this person or child on what it looks like so that they can be prepared for when it happens. Because if you don't have any defense against it, you're going to fall right into the trap. And then I would also say, our voices matter. Like, if you have like all these things going on, whether it be like legal service, like police officers, like police force, or, you know, attorneys or judges or whatever entity it is that are serving victims or intervening in anti-trafficking movement. Again, we can learn so much in a book, but I think our lived experience needs to be heard. Just like today, the more survivors you have and their input, I think the better we are and capable of preventing this from happening to the next one.
Thank you. Wow. What a powerful evening. Thank you so much. I can't tell you how much we appreciate hearing your personal stories, and thank you for your willingness to share it not only with this audience, but for the work that you do every day to help those vulnerable people who need to believe in themselves, to see you and to know that it's possible. Bhumika, thank you for the work you do with our public children's services agencies. Continue. I think reinforce the training has to be ongoing. My God, TikTok, whatever else they got out there, ticking and talking, make sure that people know that they have to stay up on that and to watch out for our children. Special Agent, I've never met a law enforcement officer like you. It is a pleasure. Thank you for getting into this work. I can't imagine when you were at the police academy, you thought one day you'd be doing this, but thank you. And Judge, always a pleasure. Thank you for your leadership in this state. Thank you for all of the programming that you do to help vulnerable children. We are blessed to have you here in Ohio. We are going to ask you to think about making a contribution, and we promise you that 100% of your proceeds will go to support 3 organizations: Advocating Opportunity, Ohio Justice and Policy Center, and CASA of Franklin County, one of my favorite programs that I had when I was a juvenile court judge, court-appointed special advocates that look out for children, that are their voice in court to help provide protection for them. We would ask that if you'd consider a contribution to the Ohio State Bar Foundation, that you just note that it is for the Human Trafficking Symposium you've heard today. I can't imagine what you would pay to have learned as much as you did today from this fabulous panel. Thank you and be well.
Judge looked at me and he says, "I see something in you don't see in yourself."
Like, I work in the judicial system today. I work for the prosecutor's office, and I walked in there with 5 felonies, 2 prison numbers, and 40 misdemeanors, and I got the position.
And the girls taught me, how to suit up and show up and how to look good and feel good and be a better me, and that I didn't have to let my past define who I was.
I see the deputies come in, and I see them, but they don't recognize me because I look so different. And I'll be like, "How are you doing, Deputy so-and-so?" I'm like, "You don't remember me, do you?" And then when I say my name, they're like, "Oh my God, what is going on here?" And I'm like, "They gave me a badge too." And it's just crazy, and it's so empowering and inspiring to myself to be able to say these things.
May 23rd, 2013 is my clean date, and I'll celebrate 7 years.
I recently purchased my very first home.
It's really amazing that it's 2020 because I really see clear about where I want to go.
For at least the last 4 years, I have taken over an organization called Reaching for the Shining Stars. And what we do is we cater to the women that are stuck in sex trafficking, homelessness, and addiction right here on the streets of Columbus.
To overcome your darkness and turn it into somebody's light, to have a purpose, is amazing.
If I can make it out and do the things that I'm doing today, my sisters can too.
This concludes the Ohio State Bar Foundation's On the Margin, Foster Youth at Risk for Human Trafficking Symposium. Thank you for joining us. And a special thanks to our sponsors, honorees, and panelists. Ready to take action? Please visit the Ohio State Bar Foundation's website at osbf.org/symposium for resources and to re-watch this symposium, or we hope you'll pass it on to others. The more of us who are aware and educated, the more we can do to help.